Good evening, more, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be venturing into the depths of the woods because there are cabins here waiting for our arrival. I hope you're ready because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This happened about 3 years ago when some friends and I went hiking on the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina. Close to Boone, but still a good 30-minute drive from the start of the trail, we came in a few hours before we were to start making camp. This kept us early enough so that we could get set up and enjoy the evening. Mountain scenery at dusk. Before it gets dark, we set up, tie our food and things in the tree, roll a joint, crack open a few, and enjoy the mountain face overlooking the valley. Truly, the Appalachians are dropped it gorgeous. Then we hear it. There's just this blood-curdling scream out of nowhere, and it seemed to emanate from the east of US, opposite from our campground in the trail. We are all immediately freaked out, with a couple of us yelling out and one or two pulling out their pistols. We all just stand frozen for a moment. It happens again, and then there is silence. It's like that horror movie silence when everything, the trees, birds, and wind, just stops. You could hear everyone breathing, like it was in your ear, and none of us had cell service. It was too dark to find our way to anything that resembled civilization, so the four of us just holed up together without sleeping until daybreak. Still a little freaked, we found our way back to our cars and the parking lot. Now the trails kind of buckle and cross. At one point in this area we turn around and we would come within 30 yards of where we heard the source of the scream, and sure enough there were cougar tracks. We ran back, informed the local ranger station, and the rangers shook their head and said, "Yeah, you're not the first to inform us of this." So bottom line, those big cats are out. I live just where farmland meets the outer edge of suburbia. On an island off the coast of British Columbia. The climate here is subtemperate rainforest, so the natural and untouched landscape is incredibly wild, dense, and lush. I am a keen endurance cyclist and as such take full advantage of the trail network in the forests surrounding my area. I work long hours, so most of my winter rides are in complete darkness with my trusty trail light. One section of my home trail winds through a rainforest bog full of trees hundreds of feet tall. It's absolutely beautiful in the daytime. It feels like a magical place with shafts of sunlight piercing through the fog, hundreds of different species of flora and fauna, and so many wild animals coming and going along game trails at night. My gut starts to tighten at the thought of passing through this mile-long section of trail. One day about a year ago, I was lucky enough to get a chance for a day ride, so I took it. It was a cold and very rainy winter day with very few people out on the trail. I had packed thermos of hot coffee in my backpack, and I thought the forest bog was a good place as any to have a break, to stretch my legs and drink my coffee. I have an interest in botany, so I was looking closely at the lichens growing on a huge Douglas fir. Suddenly I felt distinctly not alone. No biggie, lots of people used this trail, although not so many were out that day because the weather was so wet and cold. Then I heard it, a meow. That's odd, this isn't a good place for a cat to be out alone. We have lots of cougars and bears. Then I heard it again, except it was weird sounding, almost robotic, like a recording or someone playing a bad audio file of a cat. My gut started to clench. It sounded wrong somehow, and I couldn't figure out why. My hands were shaking when I unzipped my backpack to put my coffee thermos back in. Waves of nausea rolled over me as the air suddenly felt strangely dense and thick. I was in a rainforest, surrounded by trees and moss, but I felt like I couldn't get enough oxygen. I hadn't seen anyone for at least 10 miles, and I was distinctly aware of how far I was from anyone and how my phone didn't get reception here. Then I heard it again, louder and closer and even more wrong, but this was like no cat I've ever heard. It sounded like an impersonation of a cat or even a person saying meow. It was somehow also tiny, cold, and robotic. Right, it was time to leave. As soon as I got out of the bog, I rode the Rest of the way home like a bat out of hell glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. There was nothing there that I could see. I will never forget this experience for as long as I've lived. There have been some pretty unsettling things that have happened on my night forest rides, but nothing has ever spooked me like that strange, wrong meowing in the middle of the afternoon. I reside in a city center area of a relatively small city, a couple of blocks from my house. There is a lake with a 5-mile trail around it. In the day, it's just beautiful and such a popular draw. The problem is that at night, due to being in a lesser part of town with a much higher homeless and gang population, it can be pretty sketchy. Pretty questionable people are milling around after dark. And mixed with the eeriness of the lake itself, pretty scary. I had some pretty strange encounters there, but nothing terrified me as much as this one. This happened about a year ago. The sun was already setting, and I was questioning whether I should run or not. I really should have known not to run if I was questioning it, so I decided I'd do and set off on my run. I quickly learned that it is getting dark fast, 1.5 miles, and it's pitch black only with the occasional street light giving me something around 2 miles. I look ahead and see a guy just standing in the middle of the path. As I get closer, this dude just whips it out and starts peeing in the middle of the path, like blatantly. I slow my pace down to assess the situation. Now keep in mind I'm 19. 6 foot 180 pounds of pure muscle, so I'm not easily intimidated, but this was giving me a very uneasy feeling. I run around the dude on the complete opposite side of the road, and he's just staring at me the whole time. I'm getting freaked out at this point, so I pick up my pace a little bit and out of my comfort zone. It was too late to turn back since I'm already 2 miles out up ahead. I begin to see another guy standing there. I have no idea of what's going on at this point, so I run around him as well. Another half mile up, and there's another guy, and this time he's just staring at me. I'm completely freaked now, so I start sprinting my butt off. Another half a mile from my house, and I hear this ear-piercing screaming behind me. It's like it's coming from 20 different people, but it keeps getting closer. As I was sprinting, I booked it with everything I got to my house and slammed the door. I couldn't sleep for the next 2 nights. That could have just been some weird homeless guys drugged out, but it could have been much worse. Moral of the story, runners, be aware of your surroundings, especially at night. This was some years back when I was still attending high school and live feed cameras / dual ring cameras were just coming out. The old ones, that is. Must have been around 2014. So I used to jog in the woods literally right next to my house in upstate Washington. The trail began real steep, almost like a hike, then flat and steady. That's where I would begin my runs. Would run every day roughly around the same time in the morning, roughly dawn, and the afternoon before and after school. I was running before school one morning, and a tall man with a beard and a plain tan hat was sitting on the bench at the beginning of the trail. I hated dealing with people because I was an awkward teenager, so I began to look at the ground and just walk by him. As I got closer, I could tell that he was staring at me. I walked past him, and as I was going up the trail, I slightly turned around and saw that he stood up and was walking the trail behind me. Keep in mind the sun is barely coming up, so it's mostly still dark. Then I ran. This was not my normal jog. I was sprinting. No one was ever on this trail in the morning and I'd never seen him before, and for some reason he creeped me out. I knew I could go through the forest basically to my backyard, so I wasn't that worried, but I was afraid he was going to attack me or something. As I got further down the trail I lost him, so I slowed down because quite frankly I was out of breath. Then I heard a man's voice say loudly, "Well, aren't you going to introduce yourself?" That is when I lost it. I called my mom and told her I thought someone was following me on the trail. I told her a very short version about what happened, and she told me that she could meet me with her car at the head of the trail just in case the man was following me. She didn't want him to know where we lived. I went down a side trail that cut short to the head of the trail and was looking out for the man the whole time. I jumped into my mom's car and started crying. I didn't remember why, I just remember being so afraid that I was going to be taken. The rest of my day went normally. I went to school, went to all of my classes, and for the most part forgot about the ordeal. The rest of the week was normal until Friday night. On the way home from school, I stopped at the grocery store, and on my way out, I could have sworn I saw the man. I thought I was just seeing things, so I walked onto my car and drove home. I didn't do too much on weekends at all. I just stayed home, chilled with my family, and smoked with my friends and stuff like that. I was up late one night with my friend Josh, just watching bad movie after bad movie, and then we started to hear this knocking on the window, about 3 a.m. or so. I had some really annoying middle school kids in my neighborhood who were always pulling off pranks, saw that was creepy. Being the macho kids we just ignored it and continued like we were ignoring the pesky middle schoolers. The knocking then moved from the back room we were into the windows by the front door. In the morning I told my parents, and my dad checked the Ring camera. It was the man. There was a whole plethora of clips of him. First a couple of him walking by the cameras as he was pacing back and forth in front of the house to see if he could see inside, then a few clips of him stepping back and looking up as if he was trying to look into the upstairs window from afar. These clips ended at 1:45 in the morning. Then around 3 to 3:05 a.m. he showed up again and he was tapping the window and he could be seen in the camera. At one point, he stood back and realized the camera and just stared at it. He did this a few times and at one point got really close to it and whispered something like, "How was your run?" He smiled and walked away. My dad called the police and had them come to our house. He showed them the camera footage, but since we didn't have cameras in our house or the back, we could not prove he was trespassing, and there's nothing illegal about talking to someone's doorbell. I never saw him again, and when the police checked back in the following month, they said they thought that once he saw freaking out, he thought he had been caught and was going to stop doing whatever he had in mind. It was flat out horrific. I was literally being stalked. I'm a guy, so something like this has never happened before, and thankfully hasn't happened since. Safe to say, after these events, I got a gym membership. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed tonight's spine-chilling camping tales. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you more heart-pounding horror stories soon. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep the campfire burning. Like and share this video and don't forget to subscribe the channel.